The train had barely stopped hissing when Clara Tall Elk stepped down into the red dirt of Silver Butte and realized she wasn't wanted. The sun beat down through a veil of dust, hot and dry as judgment. Her worn boots sank half an inch into the powdery ground, and she had to clutch her carpetbag tighter to keep from falling. Behind her, the conductor shouted a farewell, but no one helped her down. No one offered a hand. No one waited. From the boardwalk across the street, two women in high-necked dresses paused mid-conversation to stare. One leaned into the other's ear and whispered. Clara didn't have to hear the words. She knew the shape of them. Her cheeks flushed, but she held her chin up. It wasn't the first time she'd been measured and dismissed in the same breath. She adjusted her shawl. It had once been her mother's, and though the edges were frayed, it was the only thing with color she owned. Burgundy and threadbare, but still holding warmth. The general store sat at the heart of town, 2 stories tall and crooked with age. Its peeling white sign still bore her uncle's name, Tall Elk's Mercantile. That name used to mean something. Family, safety, a last hope. Now standing in the center of a strange town, where every face turned wary at her presence, it felt more like a dare. She crossed the street, wind tugging at her hem. Her stomach ached with hunger, and her body buzzed with exhaustion. The last of her money had gone to that train ticket. The letter in her bag faded, and 5 years old was all she had to prove she had a place here. When she opened the door, the jangle of the bell above startled her. Inside, the air was heavy with flour dust and tobacco. Shelves lined the walls, crowded with canned peaches, soap tins of coffee, and bolts of fabric faded by sun. A man behind the counter looked up from his ledger. He was older than she remembered, shoulders rounded with time mustache gone gray. Hank. Her voice cracked, unused for hours. The man blinked. Clara. She smiled, relieved. I made it. I'm sorry for not writing again. I didn't know if the letter would still find you. He didn't smile back. I came like you said I could. I've got strong hands. I can help in the store. Work for room maybe just until that letter was 5 years ago, Hank said, voice flat. I didn't expect you'd actually come. I had nowhere else. He sighed and set the pencil down. I don't have work. My boy handles the deliveries now. And customers, well, they talk. You don't look like you belong here, Clara. You'll scare folks off before they reach the counter. The floor seemed to drop beneath her. I could sweep, cook. I'm not asking for charity, just to start. Hank's eyes narrowed. My wife wouldn't like it. And I can't afford trouble. Not with how things are. You should move on. Something in her chest twisted. She stepped back, nodding slowly. Of course, she whispered. The door behind her opened, letting in sunlight, and 2 women in feathered hats. They stopped, mid-step, eyes dragging over Clara's figure. Their mouths pursed. Well said one, her voice syrupy. Some folks just appear out of nowhere, don't they? Hank smiled then. Ladies, welcome. Clara slipped past them, the bell above the door ringing again, like it was laughing. Out on the street, the heat swelled. The mountains rose in the distance, blue ridges with snow still clinging to their teeth. The wind picked up grit and tossed it in her eyes. Clara blinked fast, refusing to let tears fall. She didn't know where to go. The boarding house was said to be full. The bakery wasn't hiring. Every place she passed carried the same look, one glance at her dress. Her hair, her shoes, and the door closed before she'd even knocked. By mid-afternoon, her legs ached, her bag cut into her palm, and her throat was dry as ash. She found a shaded alley between the trading post and an old church, and leaned against the wall, willing her knees not to buckle. I knew you didn't belong here. The voice snapped through the air like a whip. Clara turned to see three young women blocking the alley mouth. One wore a lemon-yellow dress that shimmered like gold in the sun. It was Coralie Anders, the banker's daughter, and self-appointed queen of Silver Butte. "You were warned," Coralie said, stepping forward. "We have standards in this town. You don't meet them. I'm not looking for trouble. You are trouble." Another woman giggled. "Walking around like you've got business here." Coralie raised her hand. "Let's help her find something else to wear, ladies. That rag's an embarrassment." Before Clara could move, hands grabbed at her sleeves. "Don't, please." She jerked away, but someone shoved her against the wall. Fingers tore at her bodice. She heard fabric rip. Her shawl slipped to the ground. "No," she shouted, swinging blindly. Someone laughed. "She thinks she's dangerous." "Let her walk away like that," Coralie sneered. "Let her show the town what she really is." Buttons popped. The front seam tore. Cold air hit Clara's skin like ice. She gasped, clutching at what was left of her dress. And then, enough. The voice cut through the mocking laughter like the crack of thunder. Everything stopped. A man stood at the mouth of the alley. Broad-shouldered, dark-haired, with a rifle slung across his back and a stare that made Coralie flinch. Clara didn't recognize him, but the others did. Red Hawk, one girl, breathed. He didn't move, didn't shout, just stared. "Leave," he said. The girls scattered without another word. Clara stood, trembling arms crossed over her chest. The man approached, slowly pulled off his coat, and held it out. She hesitated. He didn't speak, again, didn't look at her face. Just waited. Clara took the coat with shaking hands and wrapped it around her. It smelled of pine smoke and leather and something else, something clean. "You're safe now," he said quietly, without drama or softness. He turned to go. Clara found her voice. "Wait, what's your name?" He paused at the alley mouth. "Red Hawk." Then he was gone, swallowed by dust and silence. She stood alone, coat draped over her like armor. Her dress torn, her heart hammering, but her spine straight. The townspeople would talk. They'd already started. But for the first time since stepping off that train, Clara Tall Elk felt like the story wasn't over yet, and she intended to live to tell it. "They didn't just tear my dress, they tore what little safety I had left." Clara's voice barely reached above the crackle of the fire in the hearth. The coat still hung off her shoulders, two large sleeves brushing her fingertips. She sat on a split log near the back door of the boarding house, out of sight. Even now, she couldn't bring herself to walk inside and face whoever might be in the parlor. Faces always turned sharp when hers entered the room. Mrs. Turnbull, the boarding house matron, had given her one look, muttered something about mountain filth, and pointed to a cot upstairs. No questions, no welcome. But she'd taken Clara's last coins and handed her a room key, which was all that mattered. Now she sat with her back to the building, watching the orange glow of dusk stretch over the rooftops. The streets were quieter now, the worst of the day tucked into homes behind curtains. But Clara could still feel it all: laughter behind closed shutters, sideways glances through the windows, the memory of hands clawing at her clothes. She wrapped the coat tighter. It was the only reason she wasn't bare-skinned in the dirt. That and the man who'd appeared like a ghost in the alley, Red Hawk. She didn't know what to make of him. He hadn't lingered, hadn't even asked if she was all right. He just appeared, stopped them cold, and disappeared like smoke. And still, the way the girls had looked at him, terror wrapped in recognition, had frozen her blood more than their cruelty. Who was he? And why did they listen? The back door creaked open behind her. "You still alive?" a voice asked. Clara turned. A girl no older than herself leaned against the doorframe, wiping her hands on a flower-streaked apron. She was shorter than Clara, with smooth black braids and eyes the color of burnt copper. "Guess so," Clara murmured. The girl eyed her carefully, then stepped closer and squatted down beside her. She set a bundle on Clara's lap, wrapped in cloth still warm. Cornbread, dried meat, apple slice I didn't like. Clara blinked. "Why? Because you look like you haven't eaten since Montana stopped being a territory." Clara smiled faintly. "I haven't eaten since the train left Miles City." The girl grunted and sat beside her, legs stretched out. "I'm Maggie. Maggie Two Moons. I work over at the trading post. Clara Tall Elk. Figured. I've got cousins named Tall Elk down in Lame Deer. You're Cheyenne half. My mother was. My father was a man with a letter and an easy promise." Maggie nodded slowly, like she understood more than she said. "That explains the town's stink eye. You're not white enough to be proper and not quiet enough to disappear." Clara looked away, shame welling hot in her chest. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't. Trouble was already here. It just found you easy." They sat in silence for a while. Clara picked at the cornbread. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite nearly made her cry. "People are talking," Maggie said quietly. "About what happened today. About Red Hawk." Clara froze. "What are they saying? That you're probably up in his cabin already tangled in bear hides with your skirts around your ears?" Her breath caught. Maggie shrugged. "Don't take it personal. They've got more mouths than sense. But Red Hawk, he's not just anybody. He doesn't come into town much. When he does, folks cross the street. Say he used to be Army, or hunted men, or worse." Clara wrapped the coat tighter, suddenly aware of the weight of it. "He didn't say anything to me. Just stopped them. That's how he does things. Quiet, sharp, scares the hell out of everyone." Clara stared into the dying light. "He saved me. I heard." Maggie stood and dusted her hands. "There's one person in this town might give you work. Mr. Patterson. Runs the old general store near the mill. Not the Tall Elk one, the other. He doesn't ask questions and doesn't care what Coralie Anders whispers." "I don't have much to offer," Clara said. "You've got legs and lungs. Patterson's been begging someone to run supplies up to Red Hawk's place. Nobody wants to take that trail. You show up with this coat." She nudged it with her toe. "He'll know Red Hawk let you live to tell it. That's something." Clara stared at her. "You think he'd hire me?" Maggie tilted her head. "I think this town wants you to crawl into a hole and vanish. You either let him bury you or you get on that trail and earn your own piece of quiet." She turned toward the door. "Wear a different dress tomorrow. The one you're in smells like their shame, not yours." Then she slipped back inside. Clara sat motionless, the food gone, the night full. She looked up at the stars beginning to scatter above the rooftops and breathed in slow. She had nothing but a name, a ruined dress, and a stranger's coat, but maybe that was enough. The next morning she woke before the sun. She didn't sleep well. The bed creaked with every breath, and the noise from the hallway never stopped. Men stomping doors, banging, someone shouting 2 rooms down about a cheating card hand. But Clara had risen early her whole life on the farm in the washroom when her mother was sick and there was no one else to light the stove. She dressed slowly, choosing the second of her 2 dresses, a faded blue that clung too tight across the chest, but hadn't been torn by claws and cruelty. She braided her hair in silence, slipped on the worn shawl, and stepped out with Red Hawk's coat folded carefully over her arm. The streets were damp from a night storm, the wood of the boardwalk slick. She passed the bakery shuttered tight, and the saloon where two hungover men snored on the porch. Patterson's store sat low and square at the edge of the mill road. The door was open. Inside, shelves leaned under the weight of dry goods and rope and coffee beans in burlap sacks. A short man with a wide mustache stood behind the counter sorting bullets into a box. "You, Patterson." He looked up. "Depends on who's asking. I'm Clara Tall Elk. I was told you needed someone to run supplies up the mountain." "To Red Hawk." The man squinted. "That your coat?" He gave it to me. Patterson stared at her a long moment. Then he leaned back and whistled low. "Well, I'll be damned." He reached under the counter and pulled out a folded list. "You know how to ride, yes. Trails dangerous, steep, blizzards still cling to the pass. And you'll be alone." "I know. You're the first soul who's asked me for the job. I need it." Patterson folded the paper again and slid it toward her. "Then I'll pack the mule. You leave at first light tomorrow. Red Hawk doesn't like delays." Clara exhaled steady. "Neither do I." She rode past judgment into the trees where only truth lives. The mountain rose before her like a test of will. Clara gripped the reins, her gloved hands aching from cold and nerves. Dawn hadn't fully broken yet. Frost clung to the grass like glass, and her breath came out in white puffs as she led the pack mule through the narrow trail at the edge of Silver Butte. Behind her, the town remained asleep, or at least still. She hadn't waited long enough to see who watched from behind lace curtains. It didn't matter now. She had a full day's ride ahead and every reason to leave their sneering silence behind. Mr. Patterson had given her clear instructions. Follow Copper Trail north. Stay with the blazed trees, slashes of bark left by old axes. The pass would rise steeply, then level out into a high clearing where Gabe Red Hawk lived in near solitude. She was to deliver the pack, no questions, and return the next day. If he invited her to stay the night in the stable, she was to accept. If not, she'd camp on the trail. What she wasn't supposed to do was get lost, or slip, or think too hard about the townspeople who called her Red Hawk's woman before she'd ever set foot near his cabin. Her mare, a stocky paint named Maple, trudged up the incline with a steady rhythm. The mule plodded behind, loaded with flour-dried beans, jerky nails, salt candles, tobacco, and bullets. Clara had triple-checked every strap before leaving. The silence of the trees wasn't cruel like town silence. It didn't whisper lies. It just was. Snow still clung in shaded hollows. Somewhere overhead, a hawk cried once and vanished. Wind hissed through pine boughs like breath through teeth. Clara kept her eyes on the trail. By mid-morning, her thighs burned from riding. She dismounted and led the horses by hand up a sharp incline where the trail narrowed dangerously, a rocky drop yawning just beyond the edge. One misstep would end everything. "Come on, girl," she murmured to Maple. The mare's ears flicked. She trusted her footing better than Clara trusted her own. As they reached a bend, she paused to catch her breath. Below the river glimmered in fractured silver, and the town lay small and far away, no bigger than a child's playset. It didn't look mean from up here. Just distant, almost quiet. She leaned on a boulder, pressing her cheek to its cold face, letting the wind sting her eyes. Her dress clung damp to her back, and her legs trembled, but her heart was steady. There was no one to laugh at her out here. No girls with sharp smiles, no men with wandering eyes. Just stone and sky. The trail twisted again steeper now, and then finally opened into a clearing that stole her breath. It was beautiful, not soft, but honest. A meadow half-ringed by fir trees, the earth carpeted in frost-kissed grass. Deer prints pocked the mud near a creek. At the far end of the field sat a log cabin, low and solid, with a stone chimney and a lean-to stable beside it. Smoke curled from the chimney in a slow, steady thread. She pulled up short. Red Hawk was home. The horses stopped behind her shifting weight. She let Maple breathe, then led both animals forward across the open ground. The cabin didn't stir. No sign of a dog. No welcome. Just that smoke and the faint scent of pine sap and wood smoke that caught in her throat. She tied Maple and the mule to the porch rail and stepped up, boots loud on the wooden planks. She adjusted her shawl, brushed dust from her sleeves, and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. "Mr. Red Hawk, I'm Clara Tall Elk. I've brought your supplies from Patterson's store." A long pause. Then the latch clicked. The door opened half a foot, and Gabe Red Hawk stood there, backlit by firelight. He was taller than she remembered. Broad-shouldered, weathered, his dark hair tied back at the nape of his neck. His eyes, flat gray, studied her without a flicker of surprise. "Patterson sent you?" he asked. I volunteered. He stepped outside without a word, brushing past her. She stiffened but didn't move. He inspected the mule first, then the mare. His hands were steady as he checked the straps and nodded once. "You rode alone?" "Yes." His eyes narrowed. Brave. She didn't know if it was a compliment or a warning. He began unloading the mule without asking for help. Clara hesitated, then joined him. She lifted a sack of flour and followed his stride to the storage lean-to, where shelves lined the interior walls. Everything inside was orderly, clean tools, stacked crates, dried herbs strung from hooks. She moved carefully, placing supplies where they fit, matching his rhythm without stumbling. When the last bag was stacked, he straightened and looked at her directly. "You staying the night only if it's no trouble. Patterson said I could camp if needed." "You'll stay," he said. "Trail's dangerous after dark." Her jaw tightened. "I can sleep in the stable." Red Hawk shrugged as if either way meant nothing to him. "Fine." They walked back to the porch. He handed her a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside were 2 hard biscuits, slices of dried meat, and a chunk of cheese. She realized she hadn't eaten since dawn. "Thank you." He didn't respond. As she sat on the edge of the porch eating, Red Hawk took the horses to the lean-to, rubbing them down in silence. She watched the sky go gold and then lavender as the sun dropped behind the trees. When he returned, he handed her a wool blanket without speaking and pointed toward the stable loft. "Hay's clean. No rats." She nodded. "Thank you again for everything." He paused at the porch step. "You did good today." She blinked. "You didn't whine? Didn't get lost? That means something." Clara looked up at him. "To you, to the mountain?" Then he turned and walked into the cabin, the door shutting behind him with a solid click. Clara stood there a moment longer, clutching the blanket, the night air rising around her in a slow hush. Her hands were raw, her legs ached, her bones were cold. But for the first time in weeks, her heart was quiet. The town below couldn't reach her here. The gossip, the shame, the ruined dress, they were down in the dust where they belonged. Here in the hush between creek and tree line, truth lived. And tonight, it had made room for her. There was something about waking up to the sound of an axe. Not shouting, not boots on floorboards or doors slammed in disgust. Just the rhythmic, grounded thud of metal into wood. Clean, predictable, honest. Clara blinked at the ceiling beams of the loft hay prickling at her neck and the faintest chill clinging to her breath. Dawn hadn't fully broken, but light was creeping in through the slats of the stable wall, soft and blue like river mist. She sat up slowly, stiff from the ride and sleep. The wool blanket Red Hawk had given her had done its job, though the loft's draft had still crept into her bones. Her dress, wrinkled and worn, was damp with sweat along the back. But she was warm, alive. Not once had she felt afraid. She rolled her shoulders and stood brushing hay from her skirts. The sound of the axe paused outside. Then it resumed, striking a rhythm against the hush of the forest. She climbed down the wooden ladder, wincing at the soreness in her legs. When she stepped out into the pale morning light, the sight stopped her. Gabe Redhawk stood by a stump near the edge of the clearing, splitting wood. His back to her movements, fluid and precise. He wore no coat, only a faded blue shirt rolled at the sleeves. His muscles flexed with each arc of the axe, the blade singing through the air before landing with a crack that echoed against the trees. Clara didn't speak, didn't move. Just stood there and watched the kind of man who didn't waste breath on things that didn't matter. He paused mid-swing and glanced over his shoulder. "Coffee's on," he said, then turned back to the task. She found the tin pot inside the cabin resting on the stone hearth, steam rising from its battered spout. A chipped cup sat beside it. The fire had burned low, but warmth still hovered in the air like breath in a shawl. She poured carefully, the scent of bitter strength rising to meet her. He had set it out for her without a word. Just like the blanket, just like the food the night before. No performance, no expectation. She took the cup and stepped outside again. He was still chopping. Wood stacked neatly behind him. Each log fell in 2 clean pieces, and the motion of it lift, swing, split felt almost like prayer. It wasn't fury that powered him or pride. It was survival, pure and steady. He stopped when the pile reached waist height. Clara took a few cautious steps forward. "I'll carry it inside," she offered. Redhawk looked at her. His breath clouded faintly, but he said nothing, just jerked his chin toward the cabin. She bent to gather a few logs, balancing them against her hip. As they moved in and out of the cabin, working side by side, the silence felt companionable. Not heavy, not sharp. Just 2 people doing what needed to be done. After the last armful was stacked by the hearth, Redhawk sat at the small table and poured his own coffee. Clara stood by the window, cup in hand. The meadow outside was starting to shimmer under the rising sun. Birdsong fluttered from the edge of the trees. A rabbit darted across the clearing. "You always live like this?" she asked finally. He didn't look up. Like what? Quiet. Alone. Far from everything. His gaze lifted to hers then. Steady. Not unkind. Far from everyone. She nodded. He sipped, then set the cup down. "Town's not for me." "I noticed," she said dryly, then winced. "Sorry." A shadow crossed his mouth. Could have been a smile, or just memory. "They don't forget things down there," he said. "Don't forgive much either." She understood that more than she wished she did. "They think I belong to you now," she said, voice quiet. He raised an eyebrow. "Because of the coat. Because you stopped them." He didn't answer at first. Just stared into his coffee like it held something worth finding. "You belong to yourself," he said at last. She blinked. Her chest tightened around a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Patterson's got more work for you," he added. "Said so in the last order. You bring these supplies regular? I'll pay you on top of his rate." Her throat caught. "You'd hire me, you already did the hard part. You got up here." She looked away. "I need the work. I need the food," he said simply. It was a transaction, fair, practical, but it didn't feel cold. Clara stared out at the trail winding back down through the trees. Her stomach tightened just looking at it. Her body was already sore from the ride up, but the thought of walking into Silver Butte with coin in her pocket, a job to show for the rumors, and her head still high, that lit something in her chest she hadn't felt in months. "Can I leave after breakfast?" she asked. He nodded. "The mule knows the trail, just hold the reins." They finished their coffee in silence. Clara packed her things, her saddlebag light, her hands rough and aching, but her spirit oddly full. Red Hawk helped her saddle the mare and tie down the now empty pack straps on the mule. He didn't say much, but his movements were efficient, careful, like he'd done this 100 times. When everything was ready, he handed her a small leather pouch. "For the trip," he said. She opened it and saw silver. Coins. More than Patterson promised. "I can't take you earned it." She stared at him. "You didn't flinch, didn't whine, and you didn't run when things got steep. That counts." Her eyes burned. "Thank you." He didn't answer, just stepped back. Clara mounted Maple the mule, waiting patiently behind. As she turned to ride out, she paused at the edge of the clearing. "You always this kind to strangers?" He gave a shrug, unreadable as ever. "Only the ones who ride through judgment without breaking." She smiled, then small reel, and turned toward the trail. The sun was higher now, gold streaming through the pines. As she rode back down the ridge, branches whispered above her like approval. The mule's hooves clicked steady behind her, and each switchback came easier than the last. Silver Butte waited at the base, full of wagging tongues and sharp eyes. But she didn't care. She had coin in her pocket. She had dignity in her hands. And for the first time in her life, she had something that looked like a way forward. The saloon doors hadn't stopped creaking since Clara stepped inside. She'd meant to stay only long enough to deliver the flour and oats to the kitchen around back. Patterson's order was already late, but the smell of fried fat and yesterday's beer made her hesitate by the counter arms, crossed tight eyes sweeping the room as if searching for something she'd lost. That's when she saw him, Jonas Myrick, sitting at the faro table with a half-burnt cigar in his mouth and a girl no older than 15 perched too close on his knee. The sight made Clara's stomach clench like a fist. She dropped her gaze and moved toward the back door. She wasn't here for old ghosts, just work. But the girl Tessie, that was her name, saw her first, and maybe she didn't mean to, but she pointed. "Ain't that the one Red Hawk brought back?" Jonas turned his head, and Clara knew before he even stood that he'd crossed the room. He always had to own what he'd once held even after it slipped from his grasp. "Well, look at that," he drawled, striding toward her. Clara the courier, bringing bread and shame all in one go. She kept her eyes on the pantry door, ignoring the rising heat in her cheeks. But he stepped in front of her hand, landing against the wall with a thud that blocked her path. "You think a ride with Red Hawk makes you someone now," he sneered, breath laced with bourbon. "You're still the girl who begged for my coat on the riverbank." "No," Clara said calmly. "I'm the girl who gave it back." His smirk twitched. "Oh, she's got words now." "I've always had them," she replied, pushing past him. Behind her, someone let out a low whistle, half impressed, half mocking. Patterson met her in the rear kitchen, flipping eggs on a griddle that had seen better decades. "You're late." "Blame the mountain," she muttered, unstrapping the sacks and flour tins from her shoulders. He glanced up, grunted, and jerked his head toward the table. 3 new sacks next week. Red Hawk said to double it. Man eats like he's storing winter in his bones. Clara nodded and took the coins he slid across the table. Not as much as Red Hawk gave her, but enough. She turned to leave, but Patterson's voice followed her. "You stir up more than coffee when you walk in here, Clara. Careful you don't tip the whole pot." Back outside, the sky was turning to burnished copper. The streets of Silver Butte buzzed with talk wagons creaking and men loading crates for the last freight west. Clara slipped between them, head-low, hands tight around the straps of her bag. Her path twisted behind the general store where Mrs. DeWitt was arranging canned peaches in a pyramid. She saw Clara and gave a slight nod. "Ruth says you made it up to the cabin." Clara stopped wary. "I did. Then she's wrong about you." That surprised her. "I thought you agreed with Ruth," Clara said. Mrs. DeWitt set down a can. "Ruth's mouth is loud, but her ears are closed. You kept your back straight walking past Myrick. That's more than most." Clara blinked, unsure whether it was praise or warning. Maybe both. She made her way down to the creek where Maple was tied. The mule stomped lightly, already restless. She was ready to go. And Clara suddenly needed the mountain more than anything. "People here remember everything I did wrong," she muttered, tightening the straps. "But not a soul remembers what I survived." A voice answered from the path behind her. "Then stop reminding them with silence." She turned. It was Reverend Hayes, boots muddy hat in hand. His face wasn't unkind, but it bore the weight of truth too often ignored, too often lonely. "You think keeping your head down makes you invisible," he said. "But you were never the one who should have been hiding." "I'm just trying to earn," Clara said. "Then do it loudly," Hayes replied. "Don't let them bury your dignity where they buried your story." She didn't know how to answer that, but something inside her cracked a little. Not pain, just pressure she hadn't known she was holding. She rode out with the mule in tow, the trail up into the timber, rising again in front of her like a quiet invitation. No town noise, no eyes, just dirt and sky and wind. By the time she reached the tree line, her fingers had relaxed around the reins. By the time she reached the upper bluff, her lungs had filled so deeply with pine that her chest ached from the purity. She arrived just as the light slanted orange across the cabin. Red Hawk was chopping again, same motion as before. She didn't speak, just unpacked the mule and brought in the supplies. He watched her from the porch axe, leaned against the railing. "You're early," he said. "I needed the quiet," she replied. He nodded as if that explained everything. Inside, she set the coffee boiling and laid out the salt and dried beans. She poured for both of them this time. He took the cup without a word, but something softer passed between them in that shared space. A silence that didn't need filling. They ate beans and bacon over the hearth, the plates warm in their laps. Outside, the wind tugged at the last yellow leaves. A firefly blinked, confused by the hour. "You ever think of going back?" Clara asked suddenly. "To town, to people?" He stared into the fire. "They turned me into something I never was," he said, then hated me for not apologizing for it. She stared at him, heart pounding. "Same," she whispered. He looked over, and in that look was recognition, not pity, not shock, just a shared ache. "You survived," he said, "and they only remember the mess, then make a different memory." Clara nodded slowly, not because she knew how, but because something in her believed she could try. And when she laid down that night in the loft again, hay beneath her, she heard his words as clear as the wind in the pines. "Then stop reminding them with silence." Morning light filtered through the gaps in the loft planks, casting golden stripes across Clara's face. She'd expected to wake stiff, but her body worn from days of trail riding, and silent strength settled soft against the hay. It wasn't comfort, not exactly, but it wasn't dread either. Below, she heard the rhythm of Red Hawk moving about boots over wood fire, popping kettle, hissing low like it was keeping their secrets. She climbed down the ladder, slowly brushing straw from her braid. He didn't look up when she entered the room, just poured 2 cups and slid one to her place at the table. They sat in companionable silence, both hands around the heat of their mugs. Outside, the morning wind picked up scattering pine needles across the porch. I could bring in more next time, she said, her voice low. He raised a brow. More than dry goods. Maybe nails. Rope. If the path's clear past the ridge, the freight company'll sell direct. Red Hawk nodded, chewing on the idea. That'd help. There was something else. She didn't say, something that settled like a pebble in her chest. She didn't just want to bring supplies. She wanted to build something steady. Something that didn't get torn down by laughter behind her back or the echo of old names. I'm not going back for a while, she said finally. Not to Silver Butte. Not unless I must. You don't have to explain that to me. I do, she said quietly, because it's your cabin. And if I'm making this a habit, you ought to know why I choose the trees over the town. He set down his cup. You don't have to justify needing peace. That struck something raw in her. She swallowed hard and rose, kneading her hands busy. She moved to the woodpile, started stacking kindling. He joined her without a word, passing logs, splitting the larger ones. They worked like that for near an hour, neither rushing, neither needing the silence filled. Then came a sound that didn't belong in the woods. A sharp cry, faint but distinct, somewhere down near the creek. Clara froze, eyes wide. Red Hawk had already dropped the axe, shoulders tense. He moved fast, rifle slung over his shoulder as he stepped off the porch. Clara followed. They made their way down the slope, ducking through low brush past the blackberry bramble and toward the bank where the snowmelt swirled thick around the stones. Another cry. Closer this time. And then a girl. She couldn't have been more than 11. Her dress was torn at the hem cheeks, streaked with dirt, one stocking missing. She sat curled beneath a rock ledge, arms around her knees, trembling like a sapling in a storm. Clara crouched, first, voice soft. Hey now. You all right? The girl looked up. Her face was familiar in a way that tightened Clara's stomach. You're Clara, the girl whispered. Clara blinked. How do you know me? I saw you at the saloon. My mama works there. Sometimes. When she has to. Clara's voice dropped. What's your name, sweetheart? June. Red Hawk scanned the trees. She alone. June shook her head. Mama said wait by the rocks if anything went wrong. She went back for our bag. How long ago? Clara asked. June shrugged, lip trembling. Red Hawk turned toward the trail. Stay here, I'll look. He moved swiftly, vanishing behind the trees. Clara sat beside the girl, pulling off her shawl and wrapping it around her thin shoulders. You're safe now, she said. He's good. He'll find her. June leaned into her. Her little fingers clutched Clara's skirt like she already knew this stranger meant safety. And in that moment, Clara knew what it was to be a wall instead of a wound. It took longer than she liked, but finally Red Hawk returned, his expression grim. She's gone. Clara's stomach sank. Gone blood on the trail, he said. Claw marks in the dirt. Mountain cat, maybe. Maybe worse. June whimpered. Clara hugged her tighter. No one else nearby, Red Hawk added. But someone meant for this girl to be found. Clara stared at him, her thoughts already racing. Jonas, she said. Red Hawk's brow furrowed. He's been in town passing around coin like he found a vein. That saloon girl, June's mother, she used to run with him years ago. He's not just a drunk. He's mean. And he's always calculating. You think he left this girl as bait? Red Hawk's voice was sharp with anger. I think he knew I'd come back through that trail, Clara said, and I think he's testing how far I'll go. Red Hawk turned away, jaw clenched. We can't leave her, Clara said. We won't. They brought June back to the cabin. Clara warmed broth over the fire, fed her slow, gentle spoonfuls. Red Hawk whittled a small figurine from pine to distract her while she ate. She giggled once softly, and it sent a spark of something fierce through Clara's chest. She watched the child curl up in Red Hawk's old blanket that night, tucked close to the fire. "She's not a burden," Clara said. "I know. We could take her to the sheriff. He'd send her to the mission school in Helena. I've seen it. It's not better." Clara nodded slowly. Then she stays. Red Hawk met her eyes. There was a pause, silent but rich. "You're not who they say you are," he said. Clara looked down at her calloused hands, then to the girl's sleeping face. "I know," she said. "And someday I'll show them." She turned back to the fire, adding another log as the wind picked up outside. "She's not a burden," Clara said. "She's a mirror I refuse to turn away from." The snow had melted into thick, copper-colored mud along the ridgeline by the time Clara stepped outside. She could smell pine sap and damp cedar, the kind of scent that made old memories pull at the corners of her mind. June's laughter echoed from the back pasture where Red Hawk had rigged a swing from an old cottonwood. Clara paused on the porch, holding a cracked enamel basin full of laundry, and let the sound of that small joy root her in place. It had been 3 weeks since June had arrived with trembling hands and 2 wide eyes. 3 weeks of spooning out soup, drying her tears, brushing her tangled hair by firelight. Clara had expected resistance. Red Hawk wasn't one for sudden changes or extra mouths to feed, but he had taken to the girl with a silent steadiness that warmed Clara deeper than she dared admit. She stepped down and crossed toward the creek to rinse the clothes boots, sucking into mud. As she knelt by the water, her reflection stared back. Faded cotton dress sleeves, rolled skin, browned by sun hair, wild in the breeze. She looked nothing like the girl who'd first arrived in Silver Butte, or the woman the townsfolk still whispered about. Behind her, June's voice rose in a playful shriek as the swing arced high. Clara smiled, but her eyes drifted again toward the tree line. She hadn't been able to shake the feeling something or someone was watching. She didn't mention it to Red Hawk. Not yet. He'd only tightened the watch and sleep lighter, and he was already splitting his rest between tending the fences and teaching June to set traps. Clara carried it, like she always had, quietly beneath the bone. That night, as the fire cracked low and the wind howled through the chimney like a mourning bird, Clara sat with her back to the hearth, mending a hole in June's sock. Red Hawk sharpened a blade by the door. The sound was rhythmic, soothing, until June stirred from her bedroll. Clara looked up. "What's wrong, honey?" "I saw someone," June whispered. "Out past the fence." Clara's eyes snapped to Red Hawk. He was already rising, hand to his rifle. He glanced at Clara, his voice low. She could be dreaming, or she could be right. June pointed toward the rear window. He was standing by the old stump, just looking. Red Hawk moved toward the door, rifle raised. "Wait." Clara stood and wrapped her shawl tight. "I'm going too." He frowned but didn't argue. Clara grabbed the lantern and lit it low. They stepped outside, the cold biting even through wool. The moon was full, silvering every branch and rock. Clara scanned the clearing. Nothing but quiet snow and the glint of frost on bark. Then she saw it. A shape. No more than a shadow at first, tall, broad, moving slowly near the line of pines. Red Hawk spotted it a beat later. "Stay behind me." They crept closer, boots silent on packed snow. The figure didn't flee. It stood still, as if waiting. And then Clara recognized the coat. Frayed wool, familiar limp, the scent of whiskey even in the night air. "Jonas," she breathed. He grinned like a man who'd just found a gold vein. "Heard you were playing Mama now." "Leave," Red Hawk said, rifle steady. Or what Jonas laughed. "You gonna shoot me for visiting my own kin?" Clara blinked. "She's not your kin. She's blood through her mother, and that makes me something." He stepped forward. I got a claim. No, Clara said, voice sharp. You got a record. He shrugged. Town don't care what I am. Law says she's orphaned. Means anyone can stake a say long as he's breathing and sober enough to spell his name. She's not yours, Clara snapped. She's not some stray pup you toss a coin at and claim. Jonas eyed her with a smirk. You're one to talk. Ain't you the one left behind? Red Hawk stepped forward. You're not welcome on this land. Jonas backed up, arms raised. All right. No trouble. Just wanted to see the girl. Make sure she's breathing. Clara felt her fingers clench. You're not here out of care. No, he said honestly. I'm here 'cause the saloon's dry and word is you've got hands and hearts to spare. Girl like her, quiet and pretty, might fetch a trade or two. Red Hawk's rifle clicked louder. Jonas raised both hands. I'm going. Don't come back. He tipped his hat mockingly. No promises. They watched until his shadow vanished into the trees. Back at the cabin, Clara barred the door, heart hammering. June sat up on her bedding, eyes wide. He's not going to take me, is he? Clara knelt, cupped her cheeks. No one's taking you. Not ever. He said I was his. Clara's voice shook, but she steadied it. He lies. People like him say things to scare you. But listen to me, your safety doesn't belong to his words. It belongs to the people who love you. And that's here. That's us. June threw her arms around Clara's neck. Red Hawk stood silent by the door. Clara held the child tight, her jaw set. He's not coming back. And if he does, he won't find the same woman he left behind. Red Hawk met her gaze, nodding once. Then he walked to the fire, threw on a log, and let the flame rise tall and unflinching. Your safety doesn't belong to his words. It belongs to the people who love you. The wind whistled low through the pines that morning, cold, but calmer than the night before. Clara stood at the edge of the woods near the fence line, staring at the trampled snow where Jonas had been. Red Hawk's boot prints were there, too deep and deliberate beside hers. She pressed her gloved fingers to the cedar post, as if the bark could still hold the tension from the standoff. Behind her, the cabin door creaked. Red Hawk stepped out, arms crossed against the chill, his eyes sharp but quiet. He's gone, Clara said without turning. For now. He'll try again, I know. They stood there side by side, the silence between them not uncomfortable but charged, like the woods themselves were listening. We'll put up a second fence, Red Hawk said. Closer to the house, keeps her within earshot. Clara nodded. I'll train her to carry a rifle. She's just a girl. She's a smart girl. And scared. Clara turned to face him. We can't always be right beside her. Red Hawk didn't argue. He simply walked to the shed and pulled down a coil of wire. They would work the fence together. Inside, June watched them from the frosted window, her small hand pressed to the glass. She hadn't spoken much that morning. She hadn't cried either. But Clara knew silence wasn't the absence of fear, it was often its deepest form. By mid-morning, Clara was hammering in fresh stakes, while Red Hawk twisted wire taut. The rhythm of it was grounding. The work reminded her of the years she'd spent rebuilding herself in that same soil when no one believed she'd last one Montana winter, much less become someone the townsfolk feared just enough to leave alone. But Jonas had never been part of that bargain. That night, as they settled around the fire, Red Hawk dragged over an old tin box from the back shelf. He opened it and set a small revolver on the table. It looked almost delicate compared to his own rifle, but it was deadly all the same. Clara raised an eyebrow. For her, he said. June looked between them. I've never held one. You will, Clara said. And you'll learn how to use it right. Not for fear, for protection. June approached cautiously, as if the metal might burn her. Red Hawk showed her how to check the chamber, how to hold her wrists firm, how to respect the weight of a thing built to end breath. That first lesson lasted less than 20 minutes. But by the end, June's posture was straighter, and her eyes met Clara's without flinching. Afterward, as the fire burned low and Red Hawk retired to his cot, June lingered near Clara. Her voice was soft, like thread being pulled through linen. "Why didn't you just shoot him?" Clara stared into the fire. "Because he wanted me to." June frowned. "I don't understand." "He wanted to make me the monster," Clara said. "If I'd pulled that trigger, he would have had the story to twist. The law in town is slow, and the truth bends easy when it's wet with blood." June nodded slowly. "I hate him." Clara leaned in. "You don't have to carry that. Hate is a heavy pack. Sometimes it keeps you alive, but if you wear it too long, it becomes who you are. What should I carry instead?" Clara reached for her hand and folded it inside her own. "Carry this, you were never his. Not then, not now. And you get to choose what comes next." June's eyes watered, but she didn't cry. She simply nodded, and that quiet agreement felt stronger than steel. 2 days later, the storm rolled in, the kind that blotted out the sun and buried cabins in silence. The wind screeched like wounded things, and snow clawed sideways across the prairie. They worked together to seal the windows, check the woodpile boil water. The fire was kept alive with diligence, not luck. Red Hawk and Clara took shifts. One slept while the other kept watch. Not because of the storm, but because of the man who might use it as cover. On the third night, Clara woke to the sound of boots. Not outside. Inside. She bolted upright. June's bedroll was empty. Red Hawk stirred at once, reaching for his rifle, but then a voice came from the kitchen, shaky, high-pitched. "I didn't shoot it, I swear." They rushed in to find June by the back door, rifle across her lap, eyes wide and wild. Outside lay a coyote. Not dead, but yelping from a wound in its haunch. Blood marked the snow like spilled ink. I heard it scratching. June gasped. It was trying to get in. "I fired low, like you said, just to scare." Red Hawk took a breath. "You did good." Clara moved to the girl's side and looked her over. She was shaking, but not broken. "Let's finish the job," Red Hawk said, already stepping into his coat. Clara turned to June. "You want to come?" June nodded. Outside, wind bit skin raw. The coyote was trying to crawl, but the snow dragged at it like quicksand. Red Hawk raised the rifle, but June stepped in front of him. "Let me." He hesitated, then handed her the weapon. June squared her shoulders, took aim. Her breath fogged the air. The shot cracked through the storm. The coyote stilled. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Clara stepped forward and wrapped her arms around the girl from behind. June whispered, "I didn't want it to suffer." Clara kissed her hair. "That's how I know you're still good. You get to choose what comes next." The storm passed by morning, leaving a pale, frozen hush over the land. Everything outside was blanketed in silence and white, the drifts stacked waist-high against the porch. Clara stood at the door, breath fogging the glass, watching the dawn slice through the trees like a blade. Behind her, the cabin stirred to life. June, wrapped in the quilt Clara had patched years ago, moved slowly, as if every step were a memory she didn't want to wake. Red Hawk poured coffee into a tin mug and handed it to Clara without a word. She took it, fingers brushing his. The warmth seeped through her bones. "We made it through," he said quietly. Clara nodded, but she didn't relax. Not yet. June came to the window, her eyes sweeping over the untouched snow. "You think he's out there?" Red Hawk shook his head. "Not in that storm. No horse could have carried a man through it and survived." Clara didn't answer. She knew Jonas too well to assume nature would stop him. Men like him believed they were bigger than the weather. He won't face the cold, she said softly, more to herself than anyone. He waits for warmth to strike. Red Hawk turned to her. What did you say? Clara set the mug down. It's something he used to say. About wolves. But really, it was about himself. He's a coward. He always waits until someone else does the work, until things soften. June crossed her arms. Then we can't soften. Clara gave a small smile. You're learning fast. They spent the morning digging paths through the snow, checking the animals, reinforcing the back doors. The cabin stood solid, protected on 3 sides by forest and ridge. But Jonas didn't need an army to get through. He only needed timing. Later that afternoon, June helped Red Hawk skin the coyote she'd shot. He showed her how to cut with the grain, not against it, and how to cure the pelt if she wanted to keep it. Clara watched from the porch, arms folded. There was something steadying about it this moment that should have belonged to a father and daughter. But fate had reassigned roles, and no one had questioned it. Red Hawk nodded at June. You got a clear shot in a snow squall. You could hunt if you had to. I don't want to hunt, June said, eyes fixed on the raw hide. I just want to be safe. You will be, Clara said. That evening, Clara boiled stew while Red Hawk sharpened his blade by the fire. June sat near the hearth, the revolver on her lap, a habit now. Her eyes kept drifting to the window, even though they'd boarded it shut during the storm. He took my sister's doll, June said suddenly. When he left, he didn't say why. Clara stirred the pot. What did it look like? She had red yarn for hair. Ma made it before she got sick. Molly named her Violet. Red Hawk stopped sharpening. That man's cruel, June continued. He took her joy, just to ruin it. Clara ladled soup into bowls. Then let's give him nothing else to take. After supper, they sat in silence for a time, listening to the wind pressing against the log walls. Then came the knock. Not loud, just one. Then another. 3 taps in total. Clara stood slowly. Red Hawk was already up, rifle in hand. He moved to the door and opened it with care. It wasn't Jonas. It was a boy. Barefoot, shaking, no more than 8 or 9. His lips were cracked and blue, and in his arms was a blood-soaked cloth bundle. Red Hawk pulled him in without a word. Clara rushed forward with blankets. What's your name? She asked, kneeling. The boy blinked at her. Daniel. Where did you come from? He looked at the bundle. He told me to bring her. Clara took the cloth gently. Inside, it wasn't a baby. It was the doll. Red yarn. Button eyes? Torn at the neck? Violet. June gasped. He said, the boy whispered, he said, this means he's close. Clara wrapped the doll tighter, shielding it from June's eyes. Red Hawk crouched beside the boy. Where's your family? I don't have one. Did he hurt you? The boy didn't answer. He just shivered. Clara rose and motioned June toward the hearth. Take him. Keep him warm. June hesitated, but her eyes softened. She led the boy to the fire and draped a quilt over his shoulders. Red Hawk turned to Clara. He's making it personal. It was already personal. He's using children now. Clara nodded grimly. Because he knows I won't shoot first if a child's in the crossfire. He's wrong. I hope he is. That night, Clara sat awake long after the others slept. The doll rested on her knees. She remembered the old trick her father taught her, how to sew hidden messages into fabric. She turned the doll over, searching its seams, and found nothing. Still, she cut it open just to be sure. Nothing inside but stuffing and old dreams. But it didn't matter. Jonas didn't need to write words. The message was clear. I can get to her. Even now. The moonlight crawled across the floorboards, stretching like fingers. Clara stared at them, unmoving. When Red Hawk stirred, she whispered, "He's testing me. He wants to see how far I'll bend before I break." Red Hawk sat up. "Then maybe it's time to show him you don't break." Clara looked toward June, curled around the boy in sleep. "I'm not the one he wants to break," she said. "He waits for warmth to strike. He's watching us soften." The air was brittle that morning, sharp enough to cut the lungs. Clara's breath hung around her like a fog as she stepped onto the porch with her rifle slung low. Everything was still, too still. The kind of quiet that didn't bring peace, it brought warning. She scanned the tree line. The snow was pocked by boot tracks, small, erratic, only a few steps before they vanished beneath another drift. Daniel's likely from the night before. But farther off, deeper grooves, wider stride. A man's. She didn't call out. She didn't need to. Red Hawk appeared behind her, his rifle already in hand. He followed her gaze and gave a single nod. "He circled us. He's checking for weak spots," Clara murmured. "Looking for the cracks." They didn't speak of Jonas by name. Not anymore. As if saying it might summon him closer. Inside, June was spooning porridge into Daniel's mouth. The boy hadn't said much since arriving, but he clung to June like a vine to a fence post. His hands never strayed far from hers. Clara stepped inside and knelt beside them. "How you feeling?" Daniel shrugged. "Tired." "You're safe here," she said gently, brushing hair from his forehead. "You'll eat rest, and tomorrow Red Hawk will ride you to the mission down in Cold Creek." June's head snapped up. What? Clara met her eyes. "We can't risk him. You know that." June's voice trembled. "He's just a boy. And Jonas used him to deliver a threat, which means Jonas doesn't care what happens to him." June stood. "You're just sending him away. I'm keeping you safe. You mean you're keeping yourself ready to fight?" Clara didn't flinch. "That's exactly what I mean." June turned to Red Hawk, desperate. "You're really going to take him away?" Red Hawk stepped forward, voice calm. "It's not punishment. He'll be warm. Federal. Safe." Daniel said nothing, just kept eating slowly, eyes down. The tension lingered like smoke. Later, Clara saddled the bay mare. Red Hawk would leave by dusk with Daniel. That gave them hours to prepare. She checked the fences, walked the tree line marked tracks with chalk, where prints reappeared in odd places like Jonas was toying with them. He wanted her to feel his presence, to see it, not just fear it. She wouldn't give him that pleasure. Back at the cabin, Red Hawk packed a satchel with supplies. Clara handed him a map, her finger tapping the old road that curved south through the basin. "Take the low pass. Jonas expects you to take the ridge." Red Hawk grunted. "He'd expect me to know he expects that." Clara allowed the corner of her mouth to twitch. "Then maybe he'll expect you to be unpredictable." "I'm not good at unpredictable. Just don't die. I'll do my best." The sun lowered, casting long, aching shadows across the clearing. Daniel hugged June tight before climbing onto the saddle in front of Red Hawk. Clara gave him a piece of peppermint she'd kept in a jar since autumn. "For the ride," she said. Daniel looked up at her. "Will you still be here when I get back?" Clara didn't answer. Red Hawk clicked his tongue, and the mare started down the trail, snow crunching beneath her hooves. Clara and June stood silent until the trees swallowed them. Inside, the fire had dimmed. Clara added wood, but didn't sit. Her body wouldn't allow stillness. She moved from window to window, checking shadows. She knew the rhythm of the forest, and tonight something in it was off. June finally spoke. "He's here, isn't he?" Clara looked up. "I can feel it," June whispered. "He's close." Clara didn't lie. "Yes." June moved to the wall where the rifle hung and pulled it down. She checked the chamber just as Red Hawk had shown her. I won't run this time. You shouldn't have to fight. But I will. Clara looked at her, really looked. This girl wasn't the same frightened child that arrived weeks ago. She stood taller, firmer. There was something hardened beneath the eyes now, not bitter, but resolute. Clara gave her a quiet nod. If we survive this night, it's because you're brave. June's grip on the rifle tightened. No. If we survive, it's because you taught me how. They barred the doors, darkened the lamps, and sat with backs against the hearth. Wind pressed against the eaves. The night crawled by. Then near midnight, a creak on the porch. Not the wind. Bootsteps. Clara rose slowly, rifle in hand. June followed, breathing shallow. The knock came. Once. Then again. Clara moved to the door. Don't open it, June hissed. But Clara knew the game. Jonas wouldn't knock unless he thought he'd already won. She flung the door open. No one. Just snow. And nailed to the beam above the porch, Violet, the doll, ripped again, but this time with a lock of June's hair tied around her throat. Below it carved into the wood with a knife. Your ghost is coming home. Clara didn't move. The cold seeped into her skin like ink. June stepped beside her, read the words, and then turned away. She wasn't crying. She wasn't trembling. She was silent. And when she looked back, her voice was steady. If he's bringing ghosts, then he better come ready to bury his own. He thinks I'm still that girl he could own. But I'm not. I'm not her anymore. And when he walks into this cabin, he's going to find out. The doll still hung on the porch beam, swaying in the wind like a pendulum counting down. Clara hadn't touched it. Let Jonas see she wasn't scared. Let him see she didn't need to hide anymore. The knife marks in the wood whispered of everything he used to be: vicious, calculated, cruel, but they didn't have the same power they once did. Not here. Not now. Inside, Clara sat by the table, sharpening a blade she hadn't held in years. Her hands worked by instinct. Each scrape against the whetstone whispered memory and reckoning. June was quiet. She'd been that way all morning. She watched Clara not like a child looking to be saved, but like someone preparing to become their own savior. You still believe he's coming tonight? She asked. Clara nodded without looking up. He doesn't want Daniel. He wants me. June hesitated. He wants both of us. Clara finally looked up. Then he'll have to deal with both of us. They had readied the cabin for war. It didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a line drawn in the snow, and on the other side of it waited all the pain they had buried. Red Hawk hadn't returned yet. That gnawed at Clara's gut. He should have been back by now. Maybe Jonas had crossed his path, or maybe Red Hawk was hunting from another angle. Either way, they were alone for now. Clara walked the interior once more. Windows covered, floor swept, rifles loaded. She'd cleared blind corners and shifted the stove ash to mask heat trails. Every move was deliberate. Not just to protect, no. It was more than that now. It was about taking back power. She found June sitting in the corner chair, the one Clara used to fall asleep in after tending long nights of stock. The girl had Violet in her lap again. She'd sewn the doll's eye back on. You planning to give her back her voice? Clara asked gently. June's eyes didn't lift. She never lost it. Someone just convinced her she didn't need it. Clara nodded, her throat tight. That someone's not here anymore. The sky turned gray, thick and low as dusk dropped fast. Clara stood by the fire, wrapping oilcloth around the handle of her rifle for grip. She paused when the first crack of twig came from the tree line. Then another. One set of footsteps. Measured, deliberate. He was announcing himself. She raised the rifle but didn't aim it yet. He stepped into view, Jonas unchanged in posture but older. The same calculating eyes, the same long coat that once dragged behind him like the hem of dread. His beard was thicker now, speckled with white, but the grin was the same. Mocking, confident. He stopped just past the porch stairs, hands raised halfway. "I thought maybe the ghost would show herself," he called out, voice slick with amusement. "And here she is, all grown up." "What are you now, Clara, sheriff of the lost? You're on private land," she said calmly. "Is that what we're pretending now, that this snow belongs to you? It doesn't belong to you anymore." He stepped forward. She lifted the barrel one notch. That stopped him. His head tilted. "You wouldn't shoot me. We both know that. You never could." From the corner of her eye, she saw June move behind the door frame, hidden but watching. Jonas's eyes drifted sharp as ever. "I see you brought her too. Thought maybe I'd find her halfway to the river like before." Clara's voice dropped. "She's not running, and neither am I." Jonas smiled. "Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? You think I don't know what you are. You were nothing when I met you. Just some broken girl with calloused hands and dead eyes. I made you." "You broke me," Clara said evenly, "but I rebuilt." Jonas's smile faded, replaced by something darker. "You think you can rewrite what happened, that you're some frontier heroine now. I'm not rewriting anything," she said, "but I am ending it." He stepped again. Close enough now to catch the scent of his coat sweat horse and something burnt beneath. "You won't shoot," he said again. "I will," she said. "And if I don't, she will." Jonas blinked. That was when June stepped out, rifle aimed, small hands steady. "I'm not scared of you anymore," she said. Jonas laughed, but there was a crack in it. "Put that down, little girl. You don't even know how to hold that thing. I know how to stop you from taking another step." Clara didn't move. "She's not alone. I never meant to hurt her," Jonas said, dropping the mask for a breath. "You know that, Clara. She was a child," Clara said. "And you touched her, spoke to her, controlled her. Like you did with me." He shifted. "That's not fair. You taught me how to lie. You don't get to complain when I see through yours." The wind howled behind him, lifting the hem of his coat. He hesitated, calculating. And in that hesitation, June stepped forward. "Go," she said. "You walk back the way you came and you never come near us again. Or I shoot. And I won't miss." Jonas's eyes flicked to Clara one last time. Something in her stillness told him it was true. The spell had broken. He turned. Each step he took away felt like thunder peeling off the mountains. He didn't run, but he didn't look back either. Clara waited until he disappeared into the tree line. Only then did she lower her rifle. June's hands were trembling now. The fear had returned, but only after the danger had passed. Clara set her rifle down and opened her arms. June didn't hesitate. She fell into her, clutching Violet in one hand, Clara's jacket in the other. They stood like that woman and girl, survivor and survivor. The fire crackled beside them. "Do you think he's really gone?" June whispered. Clara pressed her lips to the top of her head. "No," she said, "but next time he won't find the same ghosts waiting." The evening air hung still heavy with anticipation. The cabin glowed like a lantern against the fading dusk windows, warm with flickering firelight. Inside, the silence was fragile, as if every breath might shatter it. Luna sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes darting to Ruth and then to Elia. The weight of everything unspoken pressed against the walls of that little cabin like thunder before a storm. Ruth stood moving toward the hearth where the fire licked softly at the stones. I owe you the truth, she said, voice low but steady. I never told you who I really am, and I don't think I can carry it any longer. Elia didn't flinch, didn't press her. He just nodded once and stayed seated, arms resting across his knees. Ruth looked at Luna, then back at Elia. My husband wasn't a good man. He took what wasn't his from people weaker than him. When he died, I wasn't mourning, I was running. From his family, from everything they'd twisted me into. I was too afraid to look back and too ashamed to ask for help. She blinked hard, then went on. The girls aren't mine by blood. They're my late sister's, but I promised her on her deathbed I'd raise them as my own. And I tried. I failed her more times than I can count. But I tried. Elia let the silence stretch long after she finished. The only sound was the soft pop of pine in the fire. Then he said, "You didn't fail her." Ruth turned slowly. "How would you know?" "Because I've watched those girls look at you like you hung the stars. That kind of love don't come from nowhere." Luna climbed off the edge of the couch and crossed the room to Ruth. She wrapped her arms around her waist and leaned in. "You're the only mama we've ever had." We knew in a way, but we didn't care. Tears welled in Ruth's eyes and slipped down her cheeks as she held Luna close. Elia stood, took 2 steps forward, and offered Ruth his hand. "You want help raising 'em now, or you want to keep carrying it alone?" She looked up at him. "I thought once you knew everything you'd send us away." "I said you were home," he answered. I meant it. The next morning brought snowfall. Not a blizzard, but the kind that blanketed the fence rails and softened the world. Ruth stepped out onto the porch with Elia coffee steaming in her hands. She wore his old coat too big and cinched tight with a belt. It made her look small, but sturdy. Elia was quiet as usual, leaning against the post with his eyes on the ridge. "I've been thinking," Ruth said after a while. "I don't want to just take from you anymore. I want to help. I used to work horses back when I was a girl before everything. I could earn my place here." He turned his head slightly. "You think you still have to earn it? I think I still need to feel like I do." He didn't argue with that. "Then I got a colt that could use some soft hands." She smiled, the first real one he'd seen in days. "I'd like that." Over the coming weeks, their routine settled into something that felt almost like peace. Ruth helped in the barn, tending the young stock and keeping order in the tack room. The girls attended school in town again. Elia drove them in his wagon each morning and picked them up by dusk. The house grew louder, livelier. There was laughter at dinner. Boots kicked off by the fire. The smell of pie cooling on the sill. And at night, when the girls were asleep, Ruth and Elia would sit across from each other at the kitchen table playing quiet rounds of dominoes. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't need to. But not everyone had forgotten Ruth's past. It was near the end of January when Sheriff Denny showed up again. He pulled his horse up to the porch and climbed down, face unreadable beneath his hat brim. Elia met him at the doorcoat, already on jaw tense. "I need a word," Denny said. Ruth stepped out behind Elia. "Let me guess. Someone from Benson Ridge sent a letter." "Something like that," Denny said slowly. "A woman named Faye. She's saying Ruth here took off with money that wasn't hers. Says the kids ain't legally hers either." Ruth's face went pale. "That's a lie," I figured, Denny said. "But the thing is, now there's lawyers involved, and they're talking custody." Elia's hand found the doorframe. "So what, they want to take the girls from her? They're trying to. Faye claims to be their next of kin." Ruth stepped forward, eyes fierce. "She never lifted a finger for them. Never even wrote a letter while my sister was dying. Still, Denny said you're gonna need to prove guardianship. And fast." Luna had stepped out onto the porch without anyone noticing, standing barefoot in the snow. "Are they going to take us?" Ruth knelt down, pulling her close. "No one's taking you, baby." Elia looked at Denny. "What do we need to do?" "You need a lawyer, and you need folks to vouch for Ruth's character." "I'll do both." Denny nodded once, then added, "They're gonna dig Elia. Into your past, hers everything. Let 'em." That night, Elia didn't sleep. He sat by the fire, staring into the orange coals, his dog's head resting on his boot. He thought of all the ways he'd failed to protect what mattered before. His late wife, the child they lost. All the holes he'd patched in his soul with silence and solitude. But Ruth and those girls had changed everything. They'd made the cabin feel alive again. He wasn't letting them be taken. Ruth walked out quietly, wrapped in a quilt. She didn't say anything at first, just stood near the fire with him. Finally, she whispered, "What if they win? They won't. You don't know that. I know I ain't letting them take you without a fight." She looked at him, then eyes wide and vulnerable. "Why are you doing all this?" His voice came low and certain. "Because I love you. And them girls too. You're family now. And no court in the world's gonna tell me otherwise." Her breath caught and her hand reached for his. He held it steady as granite. "You really mean that?" she asked. "I've never meant anything more." The snow kept falling outside, soft and sure. Inside the cabin, the fire burned brighter than ever. He didn't just give us a home, he gave us a place in his heart we never thought we deserved. The educational lesson learned from this story is that kindness, when extended without conditions, often returns in ways we least expect. Life's deepest blessings can emerge from moments of hardship when hearts remain open. Even in seasons of loss or struggle, offering grace to others and to ourselves can lead to healing family and a renewed sense of belonging. True wealth is measured not in land or coin, but in the lives we touch and the dignity we preserve.